Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this special interview. Today we have a returning guest to the show, Rob Kirby of Kirby Analytics, located at kirbyanalytics.com. And I got to tell you, if I was thinking about one person who can understand the markets and the economy, and especially gold, silver, derivatives, and the bond market and the dollar, and who could explain it in plain English and not only do that, but make sure anybody can understand it and not pull any punches while doing it, that would be the person we're going to talk to today. Rob, I'd like to thank you for joining us again on Silver Doctors.
Pleasure to be with you, Paul.
Now, Rob, for years, and I'm paraphrasing you here, but for years, I think I've heard you say something to the effect that you might want to have some food, you might want to have some water, you might want to have some gold, some silver, and a means to protect it. And my, oh my, Rob, in the summer of 2020, those words are speaking truer than ever and really with a sense of urgency. So I guess just my first question to you, Rob, is what are you making of all the uncertainty, the riots, the protests, and the chaos that we're seeing? You know, people comparing it to the summer of 68. And is the worst behind us, or is things just getting started here, Rob?
I believe things are just getting started, Paul. The situation that's unfolding, in my view anyway, is all traceable back to bad money. The idea that the money that's being printed is being printed because of exclusively the virus, I don't buy for a minute. I believe, and I even said a year ago, that the money had to be printed. I just didn't know what the cause or what they were going to blame the money printing on. But I did clearly state that money had to be created at a very, very voracious pace. And that's exactly what has occurred. And my personal view is that the virus came out of a lab. I believe it's man-made, and I believe that the virus was dropped on humanity as an excuse to have very visible money printing. I don't think it's an accident that the economy has been shut down or that the virus was dropped on humanity. So to me, this has the fingerprints of mankind all over it.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting because, you know, I think back to that saying, when all else fails, they take us to war. But in an era of smartphones and social medias, it's kind of hard to pull that off nowadays. But a virus, now that's not something you can see with your smartphone. So it is quite the coincidence there. And speaking of the money printing and the Fed and the Treasury, it's almost like they've come out of the closet now. And it used to be just like fringe guys that would talk about the Exchange Stabilization Fund, but now they're going and presenting themselves before Congress together saying, hey, we're a team here. We're propping this up together. We're doing the best for it. But, you know, what they're doing is not really in the interests of the average guy and the little guy. What are you making of all of the interaction of the Fed and the fiscal rescues that are going on?
Well, listen, apart from the visible fiscal rescues, as you just stated, there's also an issue that is being exposed, and it's not fully exposed as yet, but there are people working on exposing a lot of hidden money creation, which is occurring in internal government accounts. And I'm referring to the work of Dr. Mark Skidmore and Catherine Austin Fitts. They've had a fair amount of media play or alternative media play with their findings of a missing 21 trillion between the years 1998 and 2015 in the books of DOD, Department of Defense, and Housing and Urban Development, which is HUD. But let's just say that Skidmore and Fitts, their work didn't end at 2015. Skidmore's been doing further work, and details of which will be coming to the surface in the very near future, that the money printing or the money creation, and I'm going to say covert money creation, has not stopped at 21 trillion. It's mushroomed from there to tens of more trillions that has been created off book, and it is being washed through federal government agency books And this is money that nobody really realizes is being created. And it's being put to work as a simple matter of the design of fiat money with compound interest, which is our current money system that we have, the Keynesian model of money. It is seriously flawed. And mathematics dictates, Paul, that money growth in a Keynesian system with fiat money system with compound interest, money grows in the beginning at a very shallow rate upward to the right. And it reaches, mathematics dictates, and the reason math dictates this, by the way, is because when new dollars are created, they're created by lending. New money is loaned into existence in a fiat money system. And when new money is created, the interest due on the loan is not created simultaneously. This means that money growth must continue to grow to service the debt due on the money that's loaned into existence. And to keep the system solvent, you have to increasingly print or loan more money into existence so the debt can be serviced. Well, what that leads to, it goes terminal, and ultimately you get to a point where money growth inflects and it goes vertical. And the pace at which money has to be created grows at an ever increasing pace. And I believe we are now in a period of time where the amount of new money being created has to grow by factors of tens and tens and tens and more tens of trillions every year. And this money is being created. And if you look around you, despite governments claiming that they have huge deficits, which they do, there never seems to be a shortage of money. Have you ever heard America speak of, well, can we afford to invade Venezuela? Can we afford to invade Syria? Can we afford to invade Afghanistan or Iraq? Can we afford to move, one of our 12 aircraft carrier battle groups from this point on the planet to another point on the planet? No, there's never a concern about that. There's only ever a concern when people talk about whether they can afford the next social program. And there's a reason for that, Paul. They want people to believe that money is scarce. Money is not scarce. The problem that the government really has is where they are going to put the next umpteen trillions of dollars that they must create next year. Where in the heck are they going to put it? And this creates problems because when you start putting money in places where it becomes very visible, it puts strains on or finite resources. We live on a finite planet and we have infinite money creation. That creates problems. And that's why prices are beginning to rise for essential goods where we're seeing physical shortages. And a great example I like to cite, I have a family member that's in the business of procuring PPE for doctors, a lot of doctors that see patients on a daily basis. The cost of a disposable gown has gone from 50 cents in January to $50 currently. The cost of a disposable pair of goggles that have to be discarded at the end of a patient visit has gone from $1 to $30. And that's because there's physical shortage of these things. The only markets where physical shortage don't seem to impact the price are let's just say the silver market, for instance. Silver doctors, and isn't it funny, we're talking about medical and you know, you guys are the silver doctors. So, but it seems the more short the supply gets of physical silver, the lower the price goes. And the reason for that is it's the price discovery mechanism for silver, which is COMEX, where they create unlimited numbers of promises of silver in futures contracts, which they never plan to deliver on. And they create these things out of thin air. And you see, we have a price discovery mechanism, whether it's COMEX or whether it's the London Bullion Market Association, where these markets cannot tell the difference between a physical ounce and a make-believe ounce. And, you know, finding physical silver at times recently has become very, very onerous for those who need it. I have a very close friend who happens to be probably the biggest metal dealer in Canada. And he had a day 3 weeks ago where he could not find 10 1,000 ounce silver bars for immediate delivery. And he told me that was the first time in 30 years in the business that he could not find 10 1,000 ounce bars for immediate delivery. These are the bulk bars. These are not coins. These are bars that he buys and he recasts into 10 ounce and 100 ounce denominations or kilos to sell at retail. But it's not just retail where the shortages are now. They've spread to wholesale markets, and 1,000 ounce silver bars are the wholesale market for silver. And to think that a major dealer can't access 10 1,000 ounce bars of silver, first time, as he said, in 30 years, couldn't do it. So the shortages are cropping up. They're starting to crop up. And to me, it's the thin edge of the wedge of something else I've spoke about for many years, that this experiment in fiat money would end in destruction of the currency and hyperinflation. And I think we're just seeing the thin edge of the wedge of this now. And I expect the price, the shortages of critical things, whether it's food, whether it's meds, whether it's other essential goods, I look for there to be increasing shortages and price rises across the board, coming to a theater near you very soon.
And that's absolutely stunning, Rob, because, you know, 10,000 ounce bars, we're not talking about a huge amount of silver here, right? Like 2 monster boxes is 1,000 ounces. So, you know, we're talking about something that is not like procuring hundreds and hundreds of tons. So I find that absolutely amazing. And just to follow up on your point about the money creation and the fact that nobody is addressing it, you know, one thing that it sparks is, in my mind, is when you say that is kind of like, you know, nobody is talking about it. And since nobody is talking about it, well, you just arrive at this point where it just abruptly ends because nobody's ever faced the problem. And then all of a sudden it just blows up in everybody's face and nobody could have seen it coming because nobody will face the problem. Here's my point with that. Isn't it a coincidence that Cold War 2.0 with China is ramping up right now as we're at the end of this seeming system as sort of a last gasp effort to keep China kind of down geopolitically? Or am I making any sense there at all, Rob? Because here's the question. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you speak of geopolitical tensions, my response to you pointing out that we have geopolitical tensions is, of course we do. The money's rotten. Dishonest money is no basis for good geopolitical relationships around the world. I believe it's all traceable to money. And when the money's no good, people don't get along. And this is all part of the growing tension, in my view, where the rest of the world will refuse to take dollars in international trade or for the settlement of international trade accounts. I believe that the dollar's days as the world's reserve currency are now numbered, And I believe that, or actually what I fear is that when countries around the world refuse to take dollars in trade, my sincere hope is that America doesn't take that as an act of war. Because if they do, humanity's in for a world of hurt. But to me, it's an inevitable outcome because the rest of the world doesn't know how many dollars America's printing, because a lot of the printing is going on covertly and off book, but the money is being created at a furious pace and it's only increasing.
And with as far as the tensions, it's also not just across the world. It also seems like there's just tensions all around. I think I was reading this morning that, possibly Trump, Trudeau, and Lopez Obrador were going to meet and have some sort of summit for North America, but now that's either not happening because Trudeau is backing out of it. And then on top of that, I've heard you say recently that your outlook for Canada is not that good, and my outlook for the United States is not that good. So I guess just following up with the politics, but more regionally here, how do you see developments coming as we move through the rest of this year? Because there's been travel restrictions between the three countries. There's been, chaos that's spilled over cross-border. What is your outlook just for, are we reverting back to more of like regional politics here? And can the regional politics even get along between the United States, Mexico, and Canada is the question there.
Well, listen, my view about the virus, I believe it's man-made, but I do believe the virus is real, and I think the virus is very, very dangerous certainly for the elderly and for the immunocompromised segment of the population. I think, generally speaking, if you're healthy and if you're young, you don't have as much to worry about with regard to the virus. I believe that governments have gone about dealing with the virus in an incorrect fashion. To me, the people that should be, if you want to say, locked down, is not the whole economy. We should be locking down people that are immunocompromised and people that live in old age homes. There should be safeguards or let's just say restricted access, certainly by anybody who might be carrying the virus, entering into that population. But I think they've gone about it the wrong way. And I have to wonder if it's been done on purpose, because I think there are some very nasty agendas at play vis-a-vis the globalist segment of our population that does have a want for a one world government, a one world currency, and a one world religion, namely the worship of state itself. These people have had a large hand in global politics for a number of years. Trump, to me, represents, and Boris Johnson and the Brexit movement represent blowback to the globalist movement, and that's why that's why there's tension in Britain, and that's why we have the Yellow Vest movement in France, and that's why we have the hatred that's being spewed at Trump in America. It's all the globalist establishment reacting to the blowback of humanity to the globalization process. And I believe that the globalization process is one of humanity's biggest dangers that they've ever faced. So I'm a hoping guy that the globalists are not successful, because I don't think that humanity does well if the globalists have their way with us. So I would characterize it that way.
Now, one of the things that the globalists obviously use to help keep their control and maintain their power is suppressing the price of gold and all the different shenanigans they've been playing in the gold market. And I'm thinking in just the last year, we've seen so many different developments in the gold market, whether it's from Barclays coming up with some, no fee, cash traded gold and silver derivatives products, whether it's the Shanghai Gold Exchange, whose benchmark is set by the People's Bank of China, coming in and offer cash settled gold futures products on the COMEX, whether it's just recently the addition of the kilo bars on COMEX, whether it's recently, now we have this 83-ton gold scandal that's been unfolding where there's possibly some a large, not insignificant amount of fake tonnage in gold bars that have been discovered in China. So I guess the question is, what are you looking at in the gold market right now, Rob? Because when I'm looking at things in the gold market, I'm seeing these last gasps of desperation. And it's always just around the corner. And it's always just, when is this, because if the globalists can maintain the gold control, then they can maintain the power. So it's almost like it's hinging on that. Am I making sense there, Rob?
Yeah, yes. But I'm gonna respond to what you just said in this fashion. I had a discussion with a family member about a week ago where the family member said to me, Rob, you've been talking about gold for a real long time. And they said, you've been talking about gold now for like 15 years. And they said, like, when is gold going to, do what you think it's going to do? And I said, well, if you've been on the gold train for the last 15 years, you haven't done so bad. I mean, I said, like, what to you is great? He said, well, my house has gone from being, I bought my house 15 years ago and I paid $500,000 for it. And I said, well, what is it worth today? He said, well, it's worth about $1.7 million. And I said, well, that's great. I said, do you know what the price of gold was 15 years ago? And he went and checked for himself, and he came back and he told me it was $425 for gold. I said, so let's see, gold's gone up 4 plus by a factor of 4 plus times, and your property's gone up a factor of 3 plus times, and yet you think real estate is a great buy, and it was a wonderful investment. I said, gold has outperformed your real estate. Whether you like it or not, it has. So, you haven't really been punished if you were in gold. As a matter of fact, you've done better in gold in terms of a return. Now, you could argue and say, well, yeah, but I bought the house with very little money down, and the appreciation has been on borrowed dollars. I said, well, that's fine. You could have leveraged into gold as well at the same time, and your return would be still superior to what the investment was in real estate, and you would have had use of the money. So anyway, it's very interesting that because I've heard comments in the recent past. Well, Kirby, you've been talking about gold for a long time. When is it going to happen? Well, people that have been on the gold trade for a long time haven't done so bad at all. That's what I like to point out. They've done quite well.
It's very interesting because then additionally, if you think about it, housing prices have basically gone up straight up since the 2008 financial crisis, coming off of it in 2010. Whereas if you want to say that gold was in a bear market, I mean, obviously I err on the side that gold is actively price suppressed. But if you want to say it's been in a bear market since 2011 to 2015, what's closer to gold being at the start of the run, whereas housing is closer to being at the top of its run.
That's another great point to make, Paul. Instead of talking about past performance, let's think about what the prospects are going forward. We have unprecedented money creation or monetary debasement, and we have a real estate market that's at historic highs. And I'm not the only person who believes that real estate is perhaps in a bubble now. I certainly don't believe that the price of gold is in a bubble state currently. And I would suggest that the prospects for gold going forward in terms of price appreciation are much greater than the prospects for real estate going forward in terms of price appreciation. If for nothing else, incomes haven't kept up with the increase in price appreciation in real estate. Real estate has gone up really as a factor of interest rates being forced to zero. And we're at a point now where the carrying capacity of most people, unless incomes rise dramatically, people can't afford to pay higher prices for real estate. But the price of gold, the price of silver, in my view, have a lot of blue sky in front of them in terms of possible or probable price appreciation. So that's where I stand on that.
Mm-hmm. And as far as price appreciation, a couple more questions here, Rob. You know, the stock market's going straight up again, and for some reason, and it drives me crazy, Zero Hedge wants to make it sound like it has nothing to do with anything other than Robinhood traders. And I just refuse to believe it is only Robinhood traders that are pushing the stock market up. But just what do you make of the stock market disconnect? Right back at record highs, where we have massive unemployment now, massive layoffs, massive store closures all around. How are you making sense of this disconnect?
Well, financial assets are appreciating in response to unprecedented money creation. A lot of that money creation, as I said, is stealth, and it's not visible to most people. But the money is being printed at a pace that is dizzying, and most people are not even aware of how much is being printed. And that money has to go somewhere. You know, as I said earlier, we have visible money creation, and then we also have covert money creation, and the money supply has to grow in a vertical fashion at a pace that most people can't wrap their heads around. I mean, we're talking about trillions of dollars here, okay? You know, if you ask the average person how much a trillion is, most people will just shrug their shoulders and give you well, that's a lot. I mean, does anyone ever stop to think about how long it takes to count to a trillion? Have you ever pondered the idea of how big a trillion is? Well, let's just put it this way. If you tried counting to a trillion, if you started today, and if you counted 16 hours a day and then took 8 hours to sleep in each day, it would take you 240,000 years to count to a trillion. 240,000 years counting 16 hours a day to get to a trillion. So, and we throw trillions around because, I mean, the Fed has visibly printed, what is it, 5 or 6 trillion since this virus thing began, the lockdown? I mean, and they're anticipated to print, I believe, another 2 or 3 at least before the end of the year. These are trillions we're talking about. That's the visible money creation. There's also covert money creation going on that I would argue is probably in the tens of trillions. And you see, the issue is, Paul, where do you put all the money? The money has to go somewhere. It's being created, and it finds its way into things. And when you have infinite money creation in a world that has finite resources, which is our planet, prices react and they go up. Excuse me. This is why we're seeing, and at the moment, it's still spot, or the price increases are spotty, and it appears like they're only in, selected goods. And there are people that say, well, that's profiteering that's going on, in that particular thing. Well, let's just put it this way. I have a subscriber who is a veterinary doctor in America, and when I communicated to my subscribers that I was having a family member having issue procuring PPE, gowns, and disposable goggles, he responded to me that he's a veterinary doctor and he uses hydromorphone, which is morphine, as an anesthetic in his practice. He's telling me that he's having trouble sourcing morphine. Well, just think about it. So what happens if the price of morphine goes up 30 times? I mean, I'm not saying it is, I'm not saying it has, but I'm saying what happens then? What happens if people who need blood pressure meds? What happens if the price of that goes up 10, 20 times? I mean, a lot of the stuff comes from China, okay? We've outsourced the creation of, or the production of, a lot of our essential medications and our pharma. A lot of it's made in China. Just like formerly, the primary supplier of disposable gowns and disposable goggles was China. What happens when you can't get blood pressure meds and the price goes up dramatically? I mean, think about everything in our supply chains across everything in industry. Think about everything that comes from China. And, to me, we're going to see shortages across the board, and the price of everything is going to go up bananas, I believe.
I would agree with you.
And that's monetary debasement and breakdown in action.
I would agree with you on what you said there, Rob. And, it's amazing that the inflation deflation debate is still going on for some reason. But Rob, winding down here, as you move through summer, what is the one thing that's the most on your radar? Is it the riots? Is it the civil unrest? Is it what's going on in the markets? Is it what's going on in the gold markets? What are you looking at right now, and what is concerning you the most?
I think we're in for heightened civil unrest moving into election season. In my view, the globalists are hell-bent on trying to get rid of Trump. And I believe that they will do virtually anything. And there's a lot of very nasty, ugly looking things that I think come our way before the election in the fall. So it's a great time to buckle up and mind your P's and Q's. And I would say you want to keep stacking on the metal. Make sure you have some storable food. It's a great time to get to know your family, and it's a great time to get right spiritually as well. I think we have some tough rowing ahead of us.
And what do people get out of Kirby Analytics, Rob?
Well, I mean, I do a lot of media, and I keep people informed as to what I'm doing in media, and I do some writing. And I spend an awful lot of time, Paul, communicating with my subscribers, answering questions, and or speaking with them, when they request an audience. So that's what I do.
Rob Kirby, I'd like to thank you for joining us again on Silver Doctors.
It's been my pleasure, Paul.